Good morning, Spencer. How you doing today?
Good morning, Sam. I'm doing well. I'm on the second cup of coffee this morning, so getting highly caffeinated and energized. And what are we? Wednesday, midweek here.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
Wednesday. Every
So
day is the same now. It's hard to tell.
never a dull moment, man, in life or politics. Just so much going on here locally and in the state and in the nation. So it's literally never a dull moment.
Starting off right away, I have a very easy question for you.
Sure.
What should I call you? Do I call you Spencer? Do I call you Spencer Roach? Do I call you State Representative Roach? What should I call you?
Well, we'll make that a twofold question. So let me first just introduce myself to your audience and to you, I guess officially. My name is Spencer Roach, and that's Roach like the bug, R-O-A-C-H. There's no way to pretty it up, although many people try, but it's Roach like the bug. It's been a source of some interesting commentary in the political domain. But I am a state representative, meaning that I represent a small part of Southwest Florida in the Florida legislature. I got elected in 2018, reelected in 2020, and then I got reelected without opposition in 2022. So I am halfway through my third term, and in the state of Florida, we have 8-year term limits, so I can serve another full term if the voters see fit to send me back. But you're welcome to call me Spencer. That's my name. It was my name before I got elected, and it'll be my name after I finish up. So please call me Spencer.
Well, thank you, Spencer. And just to introduce myself real quick to everyone and to my new viewers, as this is the first episode of this new series I am starting. My name is Sam Jolicoeur. Primarily, I'm a realtor working in Southwest Florida, but I'm from this area. I love Southwest Florida, and I'm just happy to be here, really. It's a great part of the country. So, today, I've got several questions for you. It's not going to be any big sort of interrogation. You're not on Fox News or CNN today. You're just talking to a 23-year-old in a suit.
Great.
Yeah. So, you did mention politics and how it is a very busy, interesting time, and I suppose we should get right into that. Now, can you tell me, what does a typical day look like in your life as a state representative?
Well, there is no typical day. I would start with that. And in Florida, the Florida legislature is technically considered a part-time legislature, and that's true in theory, but certainly not in practice. And the big joke in Tallahassee amongst me and my colleagues is that this is a full-time job with part-time pay. So it's very much a full-time job. I represent approximately 180,000 constituents in Lee County, Charlotte County, and DeSoto County. And there is no typical day. I mean, you could end up doing anything from some media spots during the day to some constituent services to talking or giving talks, legislative updates at any one of a variety of civic forums, whether it's a Rotary Club, a civic association, a Republican party club, or some other outfit that wants to know what you're doing and has questions for you. So we spend a lot of time interacting with constituents and kind of getting the word out about what it is that the Florida legislature is doing, what we're working on, and why people should care.
Okay. That sounds like a lot. Definitely sounds like a full-time job.
Yeah, and I would say too, if you're trying to nail down what does a day look like, I mean, I have an office in North Fort Myers with a staff of 2, although I feel sometimes like I could employ a staff of 6. So my staff of 2 is doing the work of 6. And then I will spend, it just depends. Sometimes I could go a week without setting foot in that office. Sometimes I'm there every day. And maybe for a couple of hours, it may be all day. But, as I always say, you don't see the district from sitting behind your desk in the office. You have to get out and press the flesh and go visit places and people in the district to get to know the district and try to elicit concerns from people about what's on their mind and what you can help them with.
I love that you said that about getting out in the district and talking to people and really seeing what are the real problems facing the community in reality, not just what you hear from polling or on the internet. Because I feel like a big issue we face these days, and this is sort of part of the reason why I want to start this series, is that I think there's this feeling that, our politicians, and not just politicians, as I do want to also interview business people and just influential members of the community, that they're not really there. You know what I mean? Like they're supposed to represent us, but they're kind of just doing their own thing. So for you to say that you're getting out there in the community, actually interacting with people, I think says a lot.
Well, one of the things that I've always told my staff is that, I want to embrace the idea of having a district-centered representation. I mean, and I tell people all the time, great ideas never come from the Capitol. We don't produce great ideas in Tallahassee, and no one produces great ideas in Washington, D.C. They come from the field. And this is something I sort of learned in the military. I mean, your best ideas come from the people that are closest to the action about how to solve problems. So, I do pick up some great ideas from my constituents that I try to bring back to Tallahassee and implement in the form of statute or any other policy that we can seek to, help solve some problems that people deal with every day. And the other thing that I would just throw out there, since we're on this topic and we're trying to hopefully educate folks about the political process, one of the disillusioning parts of both campaigning and then serving in elected office is you really find out that we have a dearth of civic literacy in the United States. I mean, it's absolutely really disillusioning and disappointing about how few Americans really understand or even care about the difference between national, state, and local politics. And that's something that I continue to worry about for the future of the country. Is just sort of the lack of engagement in the political process. Most people, I would say a vast majority of Americans, probably 70% plus Americans, could not tell you who their state representative is, who their congressman is. Many people can't even name the vice president of the United States. And some of these people are people that are in college right now. You see these man-on-the-street interviews that some pundits will do, and that's something that I just continue to be disappointed with. So we need to do a better job of sort of enhancing and promoting civic literacy.
What do you think that would look like? This wasn't something I was planning on asking you about, but it's interesting. I'd like to discuss this more. What do you think the solution to that will look like? More civic education classes in middle schools and high schools, colleges, or?
I think we have a pretty robust civics curriculum, at least in the K through 12 grades, but that's clearly not doing it. And I think the answer to that is that people have to have a reason to care about it, right? I mean, when you see people investing their time in following, celebrities and learning the lyrics to like really complicated rap songs and other things, and spending so much time on social media, it's because they care about those things, or they care about the celebrities for some reason. They feel a connection to them that they don't feel with politicians or elected leaders. So I think we have to do a better job of giving them a reason to care, and giving them a reason to think that we can hopefully address some problems that they have, or even letting them know that we're here. So don't ask me how to do that. I don't know how to do that other than to try to be out in the community as much as possible, and doing programs like yours to try to get the word out to people. But yeah, I think people just generally need to be more engaged, because it is really important. And what happens locally with their city council and county commission really has such a great impact over every aspect of their daily life. So, yeah, I don't pretend to know exactly what the solution is, but I think people need to care more.
Well, I can't disagree with you there at all. And with what you said about how people care about celebrities a lot more for some reason, which I personally never really subscribed to that personally. But I think, and I don't know how this would actually be implemented, but it seems to me like there needs to be a way for politicians to be more relevant to people in society and in culture, because especially as we get to Washington, not so much, I think, on the local level, but once you get to the federal level in Washington, there's just this feeling of, these are barely people. They're just these, all 75-year-old people who can barely remember what they're talking about, and they're just there for, trading stocks, should be illegally, not to delve into that, and just not really showing any relevancy or any touch of reality with the general public. Now, I don't know how you would fix that. I don't want to see a bunch of senators and representatives just getting on TikTok and doing TikTok trends. I don't think that's the solution either.
Well, we're already seeing that. And I think you're right on a couple of fronts. One, I think that Congress is irredeemably broken. And also, you mentioned sort of the age of the people that govern us, and we are living in sort of a gerontocracy right now, where we are governed by people that are in their 70s and 80s, and not that in itself is a problem, but I think that there needs to be room and there needs to be spaces for younger voices to get out there and address some of these issues. And I'll say this. This always sticks in my mind. I remember reading when I was in law school a Supreme Court case, and it was a tech case, and one of the justices had asked one of the lawyers there in open court on the record, what is the difference between a page, when pagers were sort of in vogue, and a text message, and I think that just underscores for me this disconnect with the older generation on things, the way that people are communicating, and the way the pace at which technology is rapidly changing the civilization in which we live. I mean, you look at what's happening with AI right now. I mean, this stuff is cutting edge, or even cryptocurrency, which has been a subject of debate over the last couple of years. And I'm straying a little bit further afield from your question, but the point is, Congress is broken. We're governed by a gerontocracy. I think there needs to be room for younger voices to get engaged, and that's very, very hard to do when people refuse to sort of step aside, even though it's very clear, in the cases of, I think there's some health concerns about Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, or even John Fetterman. I mean, I think there's some real questions about some of these folks, but given our system, they keep getting elected, so it's hard to argue. I guess the people are getting the government they deserve in many cases.
Because it's the one that they're choosing. I do think that on the brighter side, we are starting to see some younger voices start to poke through. And I apologize, I forget his exact name. He's a representative over on the East Coast, Gen Zer. I think Alexandro Frost is his name, but
Alejandro. I think his name is Alejandro Frost.
Yes.
Maxwell Frost.
Maxwell Frost.
Yes. Yeah. He's a congressman. I believe he's the youngest member of Congress currently serving, and the first Gen Z member of Congress ever. And look, he and I disagree politically on almost everything, I think, but clearly he's a leading voice of the younger generation, and I think will continue to be an influence in politics for a long time. I mean, he's a young man, he's a bright man, he's very articulate, and I think he will be a voice to contend with for quite a while. But yeah, you do see some people breaking through, even on the Democrat side, AOC, who when she got elected, and I think probably still to this day, is the youngest female member of Congress. She got elected in her mid to late 20s, and on the Republican side, we have some younger voices too. I mean, right here in Southwest Florida, we have Congressman Byron Donalds, who, for conservatives, I would say he's kind of the antidote for AOC. I mean, he's young, he's charismatic, he's articulate, and he is eminently likable. And so you can see some people like him starting to break through as well on the Republican side, and I'd love to see more of that.
Absolutely. No matter where on the political spectrum that you, listening to this or looking at this, may fall on, I think that we can all agree that it is high time we start getting some younger voices out there in politics and in the country as a whole. Because frankly, I think that my generation, which it's crazy to think I'm a Gen Zer, but I am. It's crazy to think that. But I do think that, we have our issues, but overall, I think we are actually a very bright generation. We have a lot to offer.
Well, look, the future belongs to you. I mean, you look at folks like Mitch McConnell and President Biden. I mean, they are certainly, and look, this is not a dig on them. We will all be there, hopefully. I hope I make it to 83. But they are certainly nearing the end of their natural lifespan, and the issues that they're deliberating on and voting on are going to impact the Gen Zers for a much longer period of time than it will, sort of the remaining members of that baby boomer generation. So, I mean, the future is yours. You are now inheriting this thing that we call the ship of state, and we need some younger hands on the tiller.
All right, moving on to the next thing I wanted to discuss with you.
We got Eddie bringing in some water over here. We'll just incorporate this right into the podcast. We're not trying to be subtle or smooth. Eddie, you're the man. Eddie is Eddie's part of my staff here in the district office, and we're very lucky to have him. Man, he's just a jack of all trades and master of all trades. Eddie, you're the man. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, staying on the political track, I don't want to keep this political the entire time, as this is more of just a conversation that I wanted to open up with Spencer here, just so that people get to know him better and see him more as a person and not just as a name that you hear about in the news. So, staying on the political topic for just right now, though, I did want to ask you, what got you interested in politics?
Insanity. You have to be insane to want to serve a public office these days, So I've always been interested in politics. I did not have a lot of interest in politics in high school or growing up. I did not come from a political family. In fact, my parents are really still politically non-engaged. But But when I joined the military and started serving in the military, I got an awareness that people that lived far away from where I lived and had nothing to do with me were making decisions that could literally impact my life or about where to send me, where to send the people that I worked with, and I got much more interested in how those policy decisions were being made and who was making them. And then when I moved down to Southwest Florida, also with the Coast Guard, and I got sent here in 2000, I started going to some political meetings. I started learning. I did some internships. And I always kind of thought that when I finished my career in the military, I would do something in the political realm, whether it was working in some kind of policy arena or perhaps lobbying or working for some think tank or perhaps even running myself. And then I ended up getting a job working for our congressman at the time, Francis Rooney. Did that for about a year and a half, and then this seat opened up. As I mentioned, we have 8-year term limits in Florida, so the gentleman serving in this seat was a guy named Matt Caldwell, a friend of mine, who's now the Lee County property appraiser, but he was terming out. Really no one kind of raised their hand to take his place, and I thought about it, and I got asked if I would consider running 2 or 3 times, in which I demurred the first 2 times and finally decided, yeah, I'm going to take a shot at this, and knocked on about 5,000 doors in the Florida heat by myself in the primary back in 2018, and we won the primary. And given the political demographics here in Lee County, the primary really is the race. So won the primary and then cruised through to the general election in November. And I have learned, Sam, a tremendous amount since then. Good, bad, and ugly about the political process and the political system, at least here in Florida.
Wow, 5,000 doors in the Florida heat by yourself.
Yeah, and that's that's a good reason to move these Florida primaries to a cooler part of the year. But I'll tell people, and I know a lot of Americans are very, very cynical about politics and what is considered to be the corrupting influence of money and political campaign contributions. But in Florida, and I suspect in much of the country, you can absolutely win a state house seat by outworking your opponent, no matter how much you're outfunded. If you're willing to get out there and knock on doors, engage with people, you can really overcome a funding deficit if that's what you're lacking, and that holds true. With many races. I mean, I have many friends. Ray Rodriguez, who was a state house rep and then a state senator, won his initial race despite being, grossly, insanely outfunded. Matt Caldwell, the gentleman I mentioned earlier, who preceded me in the seat, did the same thing. I mean, you can see kind of boundless examples of this, at least in Florida. So I would like to dispel some of the cynical outlook on the political process, and that it's always a money game. Money certainly helps you get your message out, but that sort of grassroots engagement and shoe leather can really compensate for a lot. I'm not sure you can do that really in a congressional race or in a statewide cabinet race, but you can certainly do that at the local level.
Okay, well, I think that's really good to know, actually, for people who may be interested in getting into politics at a young age. I know as a realtor, door knocking is something they tell you is very, very important if you want to meet more people and get your voice out there. But even more so as a politician on the local level, I mean, clearly it works.
Well, listen, knocking doors, you meet some of the best people in America, but you also meet the craziest. I mean, it is an experience. And one of the things I did on the campaign trail is I started to keep a journal of my door knocking experiences. I mean, there would be times when I would laugh with people, I would cry with people, I would pray with people. And then, midway through the campaign, I started sharing some of these, what I call door knocking stories on the stump, on the campaign trail. And man, people loved it. People ate it up. And I've been really kicking around the idea of writing like a short book about that process of running for office and knocking on doors and engaging with folks. But yeah, it's a fun process. And look, I would encourage anyone listening or anyone out there to either run for office yourself or at least to work on a campaign at some point in your life. I mean, you will learn a lot about the political system. You'll make some great contacts, and you'll meet the best and craziest people you'll ever meet.
I guess still sort of sticking with the political side of things, is what have you been up to up in Tallahassee? Because I know, as you mentioned, a lot of your job is being in the community and asking people questions and seeing what are the issues that are going on. But I imagine that a lot of the impact that you can have on those comes into play when you're in session up in Tallahassee. So could you share with us some of the latest developments going on up there?
Yeah, so we just finished our most recent legislative session in March, and we're getting ready to start another legislative session in January. So we're right in the midpoint between the end of last session and the beginning of the next, and it's just coming incredibly quickly. So the Florida legislature, we really only have one constitutionally prescribed duty. There's only one thing that the Florida Constitution tells us we have to do, and that's pass a balanced budget every year, which we did. But besides that, the Florida legislature, of course, is responsible for passing every law that governs the state of Florida and sending that to the governor's desk for either a signature or a veto. So I think the governor signed into law close to 300 bills this session that the legislature sent him. And I think between the House and Senate, there was about 2,500 bills filed, which is actually a little bit historically on the low side. But, you know, some of the issues that we're working on, I think number one, front and center, something that's on every Floridian's mind, at least here in Southwest Florida, is a property insurance crisis. And this is something that we have tried to come up with some different solutions on this, but I think in large part we have fallen short of providing real relief to Florida homeowners, and this is something that I want to continue to work on next session. I have some sort of out-of-the-box ideas that I think will help, and you know, I'm not making light of the solutions that that I have voted on and my colleagues have voted on to try to sort of stem the pain here, but I think that they're taking far too long, and it may take several years for Floridians to feel that in their pocketbook, and I think that's too long, at least for my constituents. They don't have years to wait for relief. So I'm focused on going back here in January and trying to find some meaningful reform that will reduce property insurance prices in the short term, in the near term. Look, besides that, I mean, I've been doing a lot of work in the higher ed space. I think that that the campus culture in Florida and the United States has kind of become a monoculture. And I think that we need to really do more to ensure that our college campuses are truly a marketplace of ideas. So I've run some legislation on that. I've run a variety of child welfare legislation to try to fix some of the broken parts of the child welfare system we have in the state of Florida and just make that process better. I'm trying to think what else we have worked on. You know, we've done a lot in the education space in Florida. And for your viewers at home, or if they were to ask what is the single most important thing that we did last session, I think it was the school choice bill, what we called HB1. This was a bill that is now going to make the school choice available for every single one of Florida's 2 million school children. It's the largest expansion of school choice in U.S. history. So that's a really, really big deal.
Wow. Yeah, I would say so. So what exactly does that mean? Does that mean that every single child in the state, them and their parents, now have the choice to send them to multiple different schools and not just the designated public school?
Well, that's right. That means that every family, regardless of means, there's no means testing, there's no income testing, every family is eligible now to seek a scholarship or a voucher to send their child to the school of their choice, and they don't have to have their child sort of locked into a failed public school. And you know, there's this narrative on this, not that this is a school choice podcast or anything, but there's this narrative out there that that the choices are either a failing public school or an excellent charter school, and that's not really what the choice is. I mean, there are some great public schools that just might not be the best fit for your kid. There are some great charter schools that might not be the best fit for your kid. And what I tell people, it's not always about picking the best school. It's about picking the best school for your kid. And so this is just a way to allow parents to also engage in that marketplace of ideas, that competitive marketplace of K through 12 education, and pick the solution that's right for their family.
And let's loop back a little bit. You had mentioned the insurance crisis going on in the state of Florida. Now, for maybe for any of our listeners or viewers who aren't homeowners yet and aren't as familiar with this, or people who are out of state who, again, aren't really familiar with the issue going on here, could you just delve a little deeper into what is going on with home insurance in the state?
Sure. So, I mean, the real issue is that we live on a peninsula, right? We're surrounded by water, and you know, no matter how you try to sort of pretty up this issue or sort of talk in riddles about the property insurance crisis. The bottom line is that we live in a very risk-prone state. I mean, we are a hurricane state. We're on the coast. We live on a peninsula. Waters are warming. We're going to get these massive tropical storms, and we have been, since Florida appeared on the map. And so there is a cost associated with that. Is what I'm trying to say. I mean, there's a cost to living in paradise. But I think there are ways to keep those costs reasonable. We have already the National Flood Insurance Program, which people that live on the coast take advantage of. And we've received a ton of federal assistance after Hurricane Ian, which we're grateful for. But the market now is just unsustainable. And me personally, my property insurance rate went up about 54% prior to Ian hitting, and I have not yet received my renewal. I'm expected to go up more, but there are some parts in Florida where property insurance rates have gone up close to 300% over the last 5 years. And I have many senior citizens in my district now that are forced to make a choice. And for many of them, their insurance premiums are higher than their mortgage, which is just really, really crazy. So,
wow.
And then you're seeing, insurer after insurer pull out of the state of Florida. And I think it's very easy, and it's an easy target to sort of punch down at the insurance companies and make them the villains for leaving Florida. But I don't look at it that way. I mean, the purpose of an insurance company is the same purpose as any other company that's ever been incorporated in the history of mankind, and that is to make money. And if an insurance company cannot turn a profit, they're going to leave. I mean, no business is going to come here and become insolvent. And I know this sounds a little harsh, but insurance companies are not charities. I mean, they're businesses. So I understand it if they cannot make money here and they can't make a profit and they need to seek other markets that are less risk averse. The question that the Florida legislature has to answer is how can we ensure that we have a competitive marketplace that can provide an insurance product to Floridians at a price they can afford, which will still allow these companies to turn a profit and incentivize them to stay in the state of Florida. So that's the question, and we're working on some solutions to that. I have what I think is a good solution to that problem, which I will be bringing forward this legislative session.
Hold that thought real quick. I think one of my cameras just turned off.
So for those of you at home, I don't know if we're still recording or not. Kim, are we still recording? We are still live, folks. I'm taking over Sam's podcast here. Now you've got just me. I was not aware that we were going to be on camera this morning, which is why I'm in this green shirt with no makeup on and not a suit or a jacket on. And Eddie just came in and gave me the evil eye, told me I need to look at the camera. So I'm looking at you folks now. Whoever is watching this, all the millions of people who are out there around the world tuned in and watching this, hello. For those of you who don't know, my name is Spencer Roach, and I represent House District 76, which is a part of Lee County, half of Charlotte County, and all of rural DeSoto County. And it's one of the largest districts geographically in the state of Florida right now. So I've been doing this for going on 5 years, feels like 50, but every day is a new adventure.
All right, let's get back into this. So, did you have anything more that you wanted to add about what's going on with insurance? And I know you said that it's not all necessarily the insurance company's faults. They are companies that are for profit, but there seems to be a lot of anger among the community. I actually had made a few Facebook posts yesterday saying that I was going to be speaking with you today. And was there anything that you wanted me to ask him? And I had several people ask me, what are we going to do to hold the insurance companies responsible for the chaos that has ensued since Ian on many residents of the state? I mean, whoever there is to blame, or maybe it's just Ian to blame, there's a lot of perceived anger.
No, it's not perceived. It's real. And let me talk about that for a minute. So, look, I think most of the anger at the insurance companies is not anger at the premiums that people have been paying. There is some anger about that, some discontent, but the people are angry because the insurance companies, in large part, have not held up their end of the bargain. People are angry because they've been paying extremely high premiums for a product, and when they needed that product, the insurance companies did not follow through with their responsibilities. I mean, they're just refusing to pay people. Look, I'm one of those. My insurance company, UPC, went into receivership. They're bankrupt. They're belly up, and they've been taken over by the state. So look, a lot of people who diligently paid their premiums year after year after year, including these astronomical premium hikes. When the hurricane came through, leveled their house, and they went to file a claim, the insurance companies are making it as hard as possible to get money and to pay those policies off. That's why people are angry, and they should be angry at these insurance companies who have made a promise that they're failing to deliver on. So that's the source of the anger. And if you drive around, my neighborhood in North Fort Myers and Waterway Estates, you'll still see a lot of blue tarps on roofs. And look, we're 10 months. Next month will be a year. I'm sorry, we're 11 months, almost a year out from the storm. The reason that you're seeing blue tarps on roofs is not because we don't have roofers, not because we don't have shingles or people to do the work. It's because these people don't have money to put the roof on because the insurance company hasn't paid the claim yet. That's part of the problem. Now, anyone who had any money in the bank spent the money to repair their house and is fighting the claim later. But if you were not liquid and you're waiting on the insurance company to pay you, you're still out there with the blue tarp on your roof. You still probably have drywall that's been taken out and your house is down to the studs because these companies simply aren't paying. That's the source of the anger. And to that, I'd say people are right to be angry, and we should look at ways to hold those folks accountable and force them, to pay these claims in an expeditious manner. But in my opinion, what these insurance companies seek to do is just to wear you down and force you, after a year of fighting with your insurance company, which can be a full-time job, regardless of whether you have an attorney. At some point, you're going to throw it in the towel because you're tired of living in a house without a floor, a house without a roof, or a house without walls, and that's how they win.
It's honestly, I think, very despicable in a lot of ways. It's really sad to see because, like you said, they're not holding up their end of the bargain, and it really makes you wonder, how do we get out of this mess? Because it seems like it's just never ending. I know you mentioned that premiums have gone up 300% in some areas. I know for my family personally, their home insurance went up $6,000 last year, and they don't live in a flood zone and had very minor damage from Ian. And it's making them question now if they're going to have to sell their home and move to a different state because they may not be able to afford retirement in the home that my mother paid cash for back in 2004. And it's really sad, And is there a solution that you think can realistically be presented?
Well, let me hit on that on two fronts. And again, I always want to reinforce the point that, what's the double whammy here? What's sort of the adding salt to the wound here is that people have been paying for a very long time these super high premiums. I mean, we have one of the highest markets in the country, if not the highest. And I think people are happy, maybe not happy, but when they pay that super high premium, they're more amenable to paying those premiums when they're getting when they're getting what they pay for, right? But in so many cases, they feel cheated because they've been paying this really high premium, and the insurance companies just haven't delivered. And many of my constituents, and this is crazy to say, but it's true, would have been better off if they never had insurance and simply took the amount of those monthly premiums and put it in the bank for the last 5 years. They would have been better off. They would have had more money to fix their house up than they would have had they had homeowners insurance and been paying these super high premiums every month for 5 years. And then when they file a claim, they get nothing. That's incredibly frustrating for people. You asked about a solution. Yes, I do have a solution. I'm still sort of working out the fine print on the statutory language, but I have what I think is a novel an out-of-the-box solution to fix Florida's property insurance crisis, which I will be rolling out here shortly as we get closer into our legislative session. And trust me, if you're following this issue, you're going to hear about it.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about it because I am following this issue closely, and I hope that whatever your solution may be, that it can provide some real relief to the citizens of this great state.
Me too. And look, I'm not going to pretend that there aren't other ideas out there, and I don't know I don't know what will ultimately be the best solution, but I have a proposal that I think is going to go a long way towards addressing this crisis, and is at least something that's going to be worth discussing in Tallahassee. And then, voters and constituents and my colleagues in the legislature can make up their own minds about whether my proposal is one that they want to support or they want to go in a different direction. But we have to try something, right? What we have done up to this point simply is not working.
Amen to that. Speaking of crisis, what do you think? And this is a bit of a loaded question, but what do you think is the single biggest issue facing our country? I know there's a lot of possible answers to that, but what do you think?
Well, listen, I'm going to go with the answer, and for the folks listening, this is not a question that we rehearsed or anything, but the answer that comes to my mind immediately when you think what is the greatest crisis facing the United States, I think the greatest crisis is a diminishing trust in the institutions in this country. I mean, the average American's trust and faith in government to solve their problems is at an all-time low, and that means faith in Congress, faith in administrative agencies, faith in the bureaucracy. Even people are losing faith in the Department of Justice and the FBI, and even the military, which when you look at polling for decades and decades, the military has always been the one institution of American government that has stood out as having always this high number of support and respect from the American public. Now even those numbers are starting to tank a little bit. So I think this is really a crisis when people start to lose faith in the institutions of government and they believe that they're weaponized against their political opponents or they're not working or they're corrupted. I think that's when that's when sort of the building blocks of this country are going to start falling down, and society as we know it is going to start changing. So I worry about that, but I think that is the single largest problem facing the country is just lack of faith and lack of trust in our institutions of government.
I think a lot of people hearing that, their response probably be, well, can you blame us? Many people would probably say that they have many reasons to not trust our institutions as much. And not to make this a history lesson, of course, but I think that really starts when you go back to the Vietnam War, I think is when this lack of faith in government, that seed really started to grow. People were so angry about what we were doing over in Vietnam. And this is not a debate over whether or not that was a good or bad thing. I support the military at the end of the day. But that, and then Richard Nixon and his almost impeachment and resignation. And, you go through the decades. I think that's really when it started. So I think a lot of people would say, well, can you really blame us for not having any faith in government?
I don't. And don't take this as me defending the institutions or saying that people should trust them. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just highlighting the problem. Mm-hmm. No, I don't blame them all. I don't blame people at all for having these misgivings and this mistrust of government. In fact, I share them. I think the institutions, I've already mentioned Congress as being irredeemably broken. Yes, and you look particularly at what's happening with the Department of Justice and the FBI. I mean, I think there are real reasons to mistrust the bureaucracy here in the United States of America, and that's very scary. But I do think we need a complete overhaul of, what is the administrative state, or what some people would call the deep state. And Governor DeSantis, of course, who now is running for president, has been talking a lot about were he to get elected, how he would absolutely clean house with these administrative agencies. And the problem here is, administrative agencies are not a branch of government defined in the U.S. Constitution, but they've taken over many of the constitutional duties of both the executive and legislative branches. They've become a law unto themselves that's unaccountable to the people. None of them are elected, and that's a problem.
That's a very good point. I didn't even really think of that one. I can't say I'm fully opposed to that. Of course, I'd have to hear more about it, but I do think that if there is going to be a solution to the degradation of faith that we have at our institutions, it has to start with some sort of a clean slate.
Well, that's right, and I've thought about this too. And do you try to reform these agencies, or do you completely disband them and rebuild? And I think I would be in favor of completely disbanding, defunding, and dismantling some of these government agencies. And look, I'm a less government dereg Republican. I mean, I'm always in favor of less government. So I think, completely trying to strip away as much of the administrative state as possible, particularly at the federal level, and then returning that to the states is the way forward. And I would say what we need in this country right now is a 10th Amendment revolution. We need the states to really start to reclaim some of their state sovereignty as envisioned by the framers of the Constitution and set forth in the 10th Amendment, because, this leviathan of federal government has expanded into every traditional sphere of state sovereignty, and that's a big problem. And I think that's what I would like to hear, the presidential candidates talk more about.
Well, maybe they'll be listening to this.
Let's hope so. Yeah,
I certainly hope so. Now, you had mentioned the lack of faith specifically in the Justice Department and the FBI, and on my way here, I was listening to, morning news, and just yesterday, former President Trump was indicted on his alleged 2020. What's the term? He's being indicted on trying to stop the results of the 2020 election. And, it's, I think, very fascinating. And I'll let you go into this, of course, but not to make this political if I can help it. I think it's very interesting that the primary candidate for the GOP currently is a man who is facing several felony charges. And I just think it's very interesting, this climate that we found ourselves in, where so many people are so willing to support someone who, on a pure black and white legal basis, should be at the bottom of all the polling. And that's not to say my stance on Donald Trump. I try to maintain a sort of third eye viewership basis in this series. But I'm curious to know what you more specifically would think about what is going on specifically with the Trump indictments. And I know you would love to talk about this, I'm sure, the Trump versus DeSantis debate.
Wow, how much time do we have?
Well, I don't got anything until 4.
Let me say this. So now Donald Trump, of course, is facing, I think, his third sort of wave of indictments here that just broke yesterday, I believe. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of like, exposes, as you mentioned, sort of the magic of Donald Trump. And when he famously said, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and still get elected. That's starting to bode more true than we would have thought previously. And I kind of joke with people, like, what can we do to get Ron DeSantis indicted so that he can have a surge in poll numbers like Donald Trump? But look, I have not read this most recent indictment. And look, I think the timing is interesting. I think when you look at these indictments on the backdrop of his candidacy for president, there's certainly an appearance that it could be politically motivated. I think a large swath of GOP voters had the perception that Trump is being unfairly targeted, and whether he is or not, the fact that perception is out there, I think is another reason why people have less and less trust in the Department of Justice, and they feel like they're weaponizing these charges against their political opponents. And look, at least with some of the charges, I think two things can be true at once, right? I think it can be true that that Donald Trump is being maliciously prosecuted and persecuted based on the fact that he's a perceived threat to the administrative state and the establishment. And it can also be true that he did engage in a violation of the law, particularly with these classified documents. And ultimately, I mean, he's pleading not guilty. That will be the purview of a jury to make that determination. But look, is he facing the same kind of judicial and legal scrutiny that other folks similarly situated have faced? I think the answer to that is clearly no. I mean, when you look at this, and look, I'm not here to defend Donald Trump, but I am here to defend the rule of law. When you look at what's happening with this sort of a white glove, soft pedal approach to Hunter Biden, and then you look at how they're throwing the book at Donald Trump for charges that many of his political predecessors have engaged in, including Vice President Mike Pence, President Joe Biden, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and numerous others. I think I understand that perception that he's being maliciously prosecuted here, and that the DOJ has been weaponized to go after him. So. those are my thoughts on that. I actually forget what the question is now, but
Well, you answered the first part. The second part was based on what you were just saying. I get the inkling that you may be more of a DeSantis supporter. So I was curious on what your stance is on Trump versus DeSantis, because currently Trump does have the majority polling in the GOP nomination. But then, of course, there's a lot of people, especially a lot of us Floridians, who are firmly behind Ron DeSantis and think that he would be the better pick. Because I believe that whether the allegations against Donald Trump are just or not, if he deserves to be found guilty or not guilty, that's up to the jury. And I, as a side note, I think that will be the new trial of the century, and O.J. Simpson can move over. But I think that there's this perception that Donald Trump, whether he deserves it or not, is baggage on the GOP now. He had his moment and he revolutionized the party in a lot of ways, but that if the GOP wants to move forward and stay relevant, not just right now, but far into the future, they need to leave Donald Trump in the past as the baggage that he's become and move forward with someone more like Ron DeSantis. And I'm curious, would you agree with that statement? And what are your thoughts on the two of them?
Hard word, Sam. I think I would phrase my response a little bit more diplomatically.
Well, I'm not a diplomat yet.
Well, let me say this. First of all, OJ would be the trial of last century, right? We're now firmly into the 21st century here.
Very true.
But I think look, I would not characterize Donald Trump as sort of baggage or garbage to be left on the side of the road and discarded and sped away from like nothing ever happened. And I think when you look back at his 4-year presidency, I mean, there are many things that Donald Trump delivered on that he told the American people he would do. I mean, just off the top of my head, I know we had the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. We had record numbers of employment for minorities and women. We were respected around the world in foreign policy and moved the capital to Jerusalem. He delivered on many of his promises, and I think America and the world was a much better place when Donald Trump was in office. I would say that, but I would also say that for GOP voters and American voters, I think there's either a tendency to look in the rearview mirror at what came before and what's behind you, or look through the windshield into what the future holds. And I think most American voters want to look to the future. And I think we do have a very wide bench of electable candidates on the Republican side that we should consider. And I don't think it's going to be a coronation, right? I think Donald Trump, if he is the GOP nominee, is going to have to earn every vote like he did in 2016. There are no gimmies. I don't believe in this idea that the Republican primary nomination belongs to anyone, that it's owed to anyone, or that anyone has to wait their turn to get it. I think that that's what the primary process is for, is let the voters decide and may the best candidate win. And in my opinion, the best candidate is Ron DeSantis. I was an early endorser of Ron DeSantis. In fact, urged him to run for president as far back as 2 years ago. And I just think that I think he is a very competent executive. And if I were Ron DeSantis, I would be running on my record of competence, managerial competence, all day long. And I personally feel, it's my opinion, I think DeSantis is much more electable in a general election. And what I tell my friends and colleagues when they ask me how I evaluate candidates that I want to vote for in a primary is I say that I'm always going to vote for the most conservative candidate that can win a general election. And right now, I just don't see how the math works for Donald Trump to get to 270 electoral votes in a general. I don't see it. Maybe it's there. I have not heard his team articulate how they believe that math will work. So I think it's almost impossible for Donald Trump to win a general election. And I even think it would be difficult for Governor DeSantis to win a general election, but I think it's much more likely than Donald Trump. So for that reason and many others, I'm supporting Ron DeSantis for president. And look, we are now in early August. Things are moving quickly, and I don't think it's correct anymore to say that it's early. It's not early. We're in it. I mean, we're 20 days out from the first Republican debate. So we're in the thick of things. Yeah, August 23rd is the first debate for the Republican contenders. And the poll numbers have not been looking very favorable for Ron DeSantis. He's had some some peaks and valleys there, but I don't think I think it's still too early to sort of count him out. So we will see what happens if the governor has a great night on August 23rd. He could catch fire. Certainly, if he wins Iowa, that's going to be a political earthquake. That's going to be a game changer. But it's simply my belief that Donald Trump cannot win a general election. And if you look back at the history of elections here, what we know for a fact is that a Republican cannot win a general election with just Republican votes. You are going to have to pick up votes from independents and even some moderate Democrats to win. And in politics, we say that we have two types of elections, right? We have persuasion elections, and we have turnout elections. There is no persuadable for Donald Trump or Joe Biden, I would add. There's no one that I've talked to that's undecided about how they feel about Donald Trump. You either love the guy or you hate the guy. There's not a lot of people in the middle that say, oh, I really don't know anything about the guy. Most Americans have a very firm opinion of Donald Trump, and that's not going to change. I think some of the other candidates in the Republican field are still trying to persuade voters to form a favorable opinion of them. So, look, it's going to be fascinating to watch what happens in this primary. But I will say this: Florida is the center of the political universe right now. Think about that. We have the two top-tier Republican candidates, giants, titans, competing for the nomination. Both of them are Florida men. And I think that Florida is certainly having an outsized impact on the national debate that will continue into the general election. So however you feel about Governor DeSantis, however you feel about Donald Trump, I think here in Florida, we are at the center of the political universe, and we're living through a very unique time in history. And many, many books will be written about the impact that Florida had on this election going forward, and what impact that election would have on world history and world events. So it's an exciting time to be engaged and watch this play out. I have no idea what will happen. I wish I did, but I feel that Donald Trump is really going to struggle to win a general election, and I'm supporting Ron DeSantis for president. I think that he is a very capable, very competent, very effective executive, and I hope that he can translate that message into a way that's being received by the American voters to push him to the top of the field. But we'll see what happens.
And what I'll add on to that, on sort of the opposite side of things in the past, is back in 2018, 2019, almost nobody thought that Joe Biden was going to become the Democratic primary nominee, let alone the president. For a long time, he was far from first place during the Democratic primaries.
Yeah, and even back in 2016, I think at this time in 2016, Jeb Bush was still leading in the polling. It was at a foregone conclusion that Jeb was going to be the nominee. People thought that Donald Trump was a joke, that he was just running for a little bit to sort of hype his ratings on whatever the Apprentice show. No one even took him seriously, and of course we saw what happened there. So look, there's still time for some of these campaigns to catch fire and dramatically alter the political landscape leading into the nomination contest and into the general election. So look, any candidate at any moment can have a moment that sort of changes things, and I'm waiting to see what happens there on a lot of these candidates. So I'm watching all of this very closely. I think that the governor's campaign has had some very good moments. I think they've done some things that were not how I would do them. I thought the Twitter launch was very poorly conceived and poorly executed.
Agreed.
And I think some of the statements that the governor's had to walk back have caused him some political turmoil there in the campaign. But look, I'm 100% behind Ron DeSantis. I hope he can go the distance, and I'll be looking to support him any way that I can to help him get to the White House. But at the end of the day, I'm going to support the Republican nominee, whoever that might be. But we've still got a long way to go to determine who's going to win.
It's going to be an interesting next few years. That's for certain. Now, as we're walking into the final act of this special today, I want to I want to change things up a little bit and get away from the political side of things as we've been discussing. And I want to have people get to know you, Spencer, a little bit better. We already know that your last name is Roach, like the bug. But beyond that, why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself? What sort of hobbies do you have outside of being a politician?
Well, so I would say this. I mean, I'm a career military officer. I spent 20 years in the United States Coast Guard, some of the best years of my life, and that's something certainly that has defined me and shaped my identity in many ways, probably much more than politics has. But look, I'm a voracious traveler. I travel any chance that I can get. In particular, I have kind of a love affair with South and Central America. I've spent a lot of time down there, and I look forward to going back anytime that I can. I'm a big diver, so anytime I can visit somewhere that has blue clear water and white sand, I'm all in. I'm a prodigious reader. I'm always reading. In fact, in high school, my ambition was to be an author. When I got older, maybe someday I'll still write the great American novel. But I love to read, and as far as I know, I'm the only politician I know that actually has their own reading list, and it's something I'm very proud of. But during COVID, after about a month when people were on lockdown, I said to my political consultant, I said, "Hey, I think people are probably kind of tired of Netflix, and I want to publish a reading list, send it out by email." Every week for about 6 weeks with 5 books that everyone should read and do my own little amateur critical analysis of why these books are important. And of course, my consultant kind of poo-pooed the idea, no one cares about what politicians read, it's a dumb idea. Well, we did it anyway, and it took off. We were getting replies and forwards from all over the country on the book list, and it did so well that we immortalized it on my website. So you can go to Spencer for State House, that's Spencer for FOR, statehouse.com, and you'll see a tab for Spencer's reading list. You can check that out and give me some feedback on what you think about some of my recommendations. But I had a lot of fun doing that, but it kind of became all-consuming, right? And when you go there, you'll see how much work I spent sort of writing up the descriptions of these books. But anyway, enough about that. I love to read. Something I like to do. I don't have any children of my own, but I love being around kids, and I've been involved in a lot of child welfare volunteer organizations. I did Big Brothers Big Sisters for several years. I was a guardian ad litem for the 20th Judicial Circuit for a number of years, so that's a passion of mine. And then I think educating people on this political process that I've learned so much about. Is always fun. I have fun doing things like this.
I can actually, I think, relate to quite a bit of what you just said there. I am a fellow avid reader. I love books. What are you reading right now?
Well, I just finished a book that my brother gave me called The Midnight Library, and for any of your listeners out there, I kept this book on my coffee table actually in the Capitol because it had such an impact on me. But I'll try not to give you any spoilers, but it's a book that really makes you think about the choices that you make in life and the sort of wide-ranging impacts that will flow from every choice that you make. It's a work of fiction, but I thought it had a very profound message, and I like books that are so profound that I think about them months and even years later. And this is a book that I promise you, if you read, you will be thinking about it months and years later. So I read that, and I'm rereading a couple of classics. One of my favorite books is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. So I think a lot of those writers who were writing around the time of the French Revolution, Alexandre Dumas, Victor Hugo, Charles Dickens, some of those writers, I mean, really are impactful. But The Count of Monte Cristo is probably the only book that I've read. I've read that book, I think, 6 times. I mean, it's just so much in there. It's a good story. It's a story about human nature, and I don't. Every once in a while, I'll pick up that book and reread it. The last thing, now you've got my wheels turning on books. The travel books, there's a book that I'm literally always reading it. I read it, and then I start it over again. It's my beach reading. It's always in my beach bag. It's called Vagabonding by a gentleman named Rolf Potts, who I follow, and I follow on a podcast too. He's a travel writer. But when I read that book, Vagabonding, I mean, I feel like Rolf is speaking directly to me. And if you get a chance to pick that up, it's a bit dated. It was written in the early 2000s, at sort of the dawn of the internet travel age, but it's still, I think, very impactful and very powerful, and makes me think about being, at least temporarily, being an expat when I get done playing politics. And by that, I mean living and traveling for an extended time outside of the United States. I've always had an interest in doing that. I did that for about 6 months when I retired from the military, and I still have the itch to go back and do some more of that.
Traveling is so important to me in my life as well. I'm actually going to be going on a fun little trip in the next few weeks, an Alaskan cruise that I was invited on. I've never been to Alaska, so I'm thrilled for that.
Well, listen, I spent 4 years of my youth in Alaska with the Coast Guard, and I will tell you that there are some very nice places in Alaska. I mean, Juneau, Sitka, Ketchikan, but I was never there.
Were you ever in Kodiak?
Yes, I spent a ton of time on the Aleutian Chain, Kodiak, Dutch Harbor. I did not enjoy it. We were there. It seemed like it was 18 hours of darkness all the time, Dutch Harbor mud, kid from the Sun Belt. So Alaska was not my jam. But if you're ever going to Alaska, I would say the way to see it is from the deck of a cruise ship. So enjoy that.
Oh, I plan on it. I'm beyond thrilled to see that incredible state. And I wanted to say thank you for your service in the Coast Guard. Obviously, this doesn't compare, but I actually almost nearly did join the Coast Guard myself. And honestly, the only thing that stopped it, without making too many excuses for myself, is bureaucracy. I did fantastic on the ASVAB, and they actually invited me to join the Navy's nuclear physicist program. And I said, well, thank you very much for that, but I don't hate my life. So I don't want to do that. But honestly, bureaucracy got in the way. I was ready to go. I started working out. I started memorizing all of the different mission statements, and something happened with medical stuff. They needed paperwork, try to get it to them, back and forth, and of course, back and forth means 3 months at a time because you're talking about the federal government. And eventually got to the point where I said, I can't keep waiting. I need to get on with my life. So now here I am, doing this and being a realtor and just forging a new path. Maybe someday, if things don't work out, I might always rejoin, because honestly, I was really excited for it. I was going to be an aerospace electronics technician with plans to go to the officer candidate school and become a pilot. But thank you for what you did. And what did you do in the Coast Guard, actually?
Well, first of all, let me address your sort of story. You know, I think that everything happens for a reason and things work out the way they're supposed to, but you could still look at doing the reserves, or even here locally doing the state guard, which we've set up in the state of Florida. But I did a little bit of everything in the Coast Guard. I was enlisted for about 10 years doing, counter narcotics off the coast of Florida, in many cases, illegal alien repatriation at sea, environmental protection. And then I got my officer's commission at about 10 years in, and then I went to law school on the JAG program. So I served my last 5 years as a military attorney, which we call a JAG officer, and then I retired in 2016. So I had really 3 careers in one: my enlisted career, my junior officer career, and then my career as a lawyer. But great experience. I would highly recommend it to any young person coming out of high school that feels like they need some direction and some discipline. I certainly did, and I got that.
That's what I tell my friends too, as with all of the issues that everyone is facing these days. But I do think it's a very hard world for young people now to go into, just because of the environment that we live in now. But I think that if you really don't know what to do, just go in the military. You might like it more than you think you will. I know, again, I still think about it a lot, to be honest. I was really, really excited for it. I knew I was going to love it, but it just didn't happen, But a quick story I wanted to give you as we're wrapping up here. And I promise this will make sense at the end. So I have a little sister, and she's much younger than me. She is currently 12 years old. She, starting in July 2020, had this idea for something. And again, not to get political, but this is my family we're talking about. When the defunding the police movement started and there were protests and riots across the country, my little sister saw that on TV and looked at my mom one day. I wasn't there. This is what they told me. And she said, "Mom, this is really sad. Why are people doing this? For context, my family is very pro-police. My father is a retired police lieutenant after 20 years, and he saw some stuff. But I digress. She said, Mom, what can we do for them? And my mom, being a little bit of a crafty person, said, well, we can make blue line flags for them out of plywood. So they got some plywood, sanded it down, cut it up, painted them, and just as a thank you, wanted to give sheriff's deputies these blue line flags to say, hey, we appreciate what you're doing, and you have supporters. Well, it started with them driving down Tamiami Trail, pulling over officers. I love the image of this woman in a minivan pulling over an officer on the side of the road, waving him down and holding up a flag saying, would you like one of these? And eventually it grew. More and more sheriff's deputies in Charlotte County started getting these flags, and eventually some in Lee County. I was here last year, met the Lee County undersheriff and several of the other deputies there. And it has since then grown into a rudimentary program that they call Spreading Smiles. And I actually have plans to potentially turn this into more of a sort of nonprofit with them in the future, because this has really grown into something bigger. They have gone to almost every single county in the state of Florida. They're going on a trip, I think, next weekend or 2 weekends from now to hit Miami-Dade, Monroe, and one other county that I forget the name of. And then they will have given at least a handful of deputies in every single county in the state of Florida one of these blue line flags. They also make green line flags for veterans. And the biggest recipient of that is my little sister did give Ron DeSantis a flag at the sheriff's conference in Jacksonville a couple of years back. And there's a big photo of that. It's my mom's, I think it's her profile picture on Facebook. But I did ask them about this, and they said, yes, they get me one. So I've got one to give you too.
All right.
Signed by my sister.
What are they called? Spreading
on
Smiles?
the back. Spreading Smiles, yes. It's a green line flag that they make out of plywood. And it's got her information on the back here. Thank you for doing this, Spreading Smiles. That's a little picture of my sister. And she signed it for you. And
is that her name, Emma?
Emma, yes.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see on the camera there, that number, 1314. This is the 1,314th flag being given to you.
Well, Emma, if you're watching, thank you very much. I will display this with pride in my district office here. So thank you very much for gifting me, honoring me with this, and for all you're doing to support our men and women in uniform every day. So thank you, Emma.
Yes.
And thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Now, I think that pretty much wraps up what I had planned today. Was there anything else that you wanted to ask me about, or anything that you wanted to discuss? I know that we are going a little over time here, but...
Well, we're over time. I know you'll edit it down. And in closing, I would just tell everyone, look, stay engaged and stay focused, and remember that this is your government and we work for you.
Thank you very much for leaving us off with that. There were a few more questions I wanted to ask, but for the sake of time, I think we'll leave that for another time.
We'll be back another time.
We'll be back another time. Thank you so much, Spencer. This was awesome.
All right. Have a great day.
All right. I think we're all done here. Hi there. If you made it to this point, congratulations. You made it all the way to the end. Being that this is the first episode, there's just a few things I wanted to say real quick, and we'll wrap it up here. So just to recap, this is the first episode of a new series I'm starting called The Talk About... ... With me, Sam Jolicoeur, a Southwest Florida realtor and a native of the area, talking to prominent members of the local community, whether that be politicians, notable business people, or just noteworthy figures that you find out and about in the area. The reason that I'm talking to these people is so that we can get to know them better as the human beings that they are, get to know their backstories and who they are beyond the names that we hear on the news, what we see on the ballots, and who we hear about on the street or in the local businesses. This episode was filmed at the Collaboratory, a nonprofit in Fort Myers, and I just want to thank them very much for providing us this wonderful recording space, and you should absolutely go check them out. They deserve a big shout out for the work they're trying to get done in Southwest Florida. And once again, I was interviewing Republican State Representative Spencer Roach of North Fort Myers, DeSoto County, and part of Charlotte County during this interview. I would just like to disclose that I am doing my best to stay unbiased and provide a sort of listener perspective, a sort of third eye in this conversation. Of course, I'm a human being, so it's impossible to stay totally unbiased, but I promise you, I'm going to do my best to just ask the questions that people are asking me. I'd also like to say that if you watch this on YouTube, please leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like if you enjoyed it, and let me know what you'd like to hear about more of in the future. If you listen to this on a streaming service such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give me an honest rating of whatever you think I deserve. And again, let me know what you like, what you didn't like, and what you'd like to see more of in the future. If you would like to come on this show, or if you know someone who you think should come on this show, go ahead and send me an email. I will leave the email for this program in the description. And I'm not going to limit myself to just Southwest Florida. If you are someone who thinks should be on this, or again, if you know someone who should be on this, or if you just have a suggestion or something you'd like to say, no matter where you are in Florida or the country or even the world, go ahead and let me know down below. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your coworkers, tell your boss, tell your pastor, tell the president, tell whoever you want, and thank you very much for listening to this or watching this. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.